Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Colleen, yes, once again, a great friend of StarFox and a member of the North American Dogman Project Science Team, has found their way into the darkness of the Fox Den to awaken me. Yes, that was absolutely delicious. Even though I am still so hungry, I guess feeding will have to wait until Colleen and myself once again take a walk into the darkness with the Midnight Society.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, once again, it is time for Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. I see you have found your way through the dense, dark, and foggy forest to sit down around the fire and burn the late night timber as we once again read a few chapters from the Midnight Society book. Get ready to nerd out once again. We have been having our science team roll on here back to back to back, which is great because I don't know about y'all, I love to learn and mirror on the floor who's the dopest monster of them all. Colleen, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I am good. I am sitting here linking up with you before I actually get to link up with one of our other scientists, and I am drinking some good old V8 juice and just got done doing a little bit of meditation, and I'm ready to roll. So
There you go. Very good. I am really looking forward to this discussion based on what we were just talking about. So it's going to be exciting.
We always have great stuff. So you have some really epic things you're going to bring up. But before I throw you the mic, I have a few interesting things that I think you might like to hear too.
Yeah.
And recently, with our science team, brilliant minds, and also people that I don't even have affiliations with that are brilliant minds as well. I've just been listening, reading, and there is a really good, yes, I'm going to say theory now because I think it's popped over the hypothesis stage because there's actually a lot of evidence supporting this, that when you look at Mother Nature and evolution, whenever something disappears, the void is then filled with something very similar, whether it's a prey item or a predator. And they have numerous times found animals that have higher levels of extinct supposed DNA inside of them, meaning recently a grizzly bear with a very large DNA base of a short-faced cave bear. It's really not that hard to think, though. I mean, they are relatives, and why would nature not have a blueprint? I mean, look throughout history. Like I just said, something disappears, whether it's an Allosaurus or a T-Rex, something else fills the void. So same thing, whether it was large cats, it might not be just as big, but it's still another dominant predator. And I just first wanted your opinion on that before I say something else too.
No, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right that you have a niche, an animal's going to fill it, or a void, or I think that I don't think that when you create a void, it stays in a vacuum. We're going to have something fill it. And that's really fascinating about the DNA found in the grizzly that they're able to find that. And do you know where that grizzly was taken?
I will send you the article later. I believe it was somewhere in Canada, almost near Alaska.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense because that tundra up there, I mean, there's hardly anybody up there, right? So it's just vast up there, empty land. Um, so that makes sense that if you've got um, grizzlies with that DNA structure that they're hanging out up there. Gosh, that's really fascinating.
Right? And also, this actually was something else that just popped into my head. It's the same thing with when you actually sit back and think whether or not they are there or not in Alaska, the Siberian tiger, etc. It's almost an anomaly that they're not there yet, meaning have they just had this much food permanently in Russia that they didn't need to come over while everybody else did to Canada and such? I don't know. I feel like that's kind of far fetched. I honestly don't see any reason why a solitary predator like a tiger, I mean, they don't group up. So the odds of seeing one of those in the very dense, cold areas that people don't go around all the time is super interesting. And same thing with that supposed picture and trail cam of that tiger in Alaska. I mean, there is a zoo that supposedly was supposed to be getting a shipment of these tigers that there is a rumor floating around that a couple of them escaped. Don't know, keyword rumor, but like I just said, it's really interesting how they're not already there. And I've been nerding out hardcore. I think that's why my brain's a little like not plugged in the right way because I've been learning so much, which is great, but I gotta dump out the cash. So
Yeah.
recently with the La Brea tar pit, all right, a lot of people don't realize the majority of animals that are found in there are three species: the woolly mammoth, which, well, that doesn't really point to much intellect if you continuously get stuck in a big pit of tar and your relatives and they're too screaming for help and you decide to walk into the same thing. Saber-toothed tigers as well, which again doesn't point to much intellect. I mean, they're not finding gray wolves in there. They're not finding many, cave lions or things like that. They're literally finding saber-toothed tigers, dummies, and then dire wolves. That's it. And same thing with the dire wolves is they weren't believed to be as smart as gray wolves and some of the other canines that were around at that point in time. They were more dominant because they were big and they were in packs, but they're also related to jackals, which is super interesting, but they don't look like jackals. And jackals aren't really known, correct me if I'm wrong, to be in large pride groups or large packs like that. So again, we're talking about something that was misdiagnosed as not a wolf, has no relation whatsoever, and actually had a ton of different behaviorisms and really wasn't as smart. And I just wanted to hear your opinion on that too.
So there is that theory, right? They're just not as smart, and that's why they got trapped. What's interesting, if you go to the Dinosaur National Monument in Vernal, they have like a whole building built around an excavated wall with dinosaurs. Like it's just huge, right? And a huge portion of the dinosaurs were shipped to other museums all over the world. But their theory is that it wasn't necessarily that all these dinosaurs ended up there because they weren't really that smart and they just like, help me, and they all come running in. It's that there was a water source. So they come in because as the desert area became the desert, there's a water source. They all came in because the climate was turning drier. And so their water sources were drying up. So as they all come in to drink, they got stuck in the mud and sunk. And so, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering about this as well. Down at the tar pits, if that didn't happen there.
It would make a ton of sense. I guess the only thing I'm still just potentially wondering is if, man, how lost do you have to be though to just see one over and over again, keep going into the same spot and disappearing? Why are the gray wolves not really in there and such? And why is it really predominantly just those three kind of beings? I mean, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I look at habitat. That's what I boiled a lot of things down to is the habitat down there was very dry.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't typically find wolves in more of a either tundra and forest environments, not
Hmm.
so much these arid, real dry. I mean, where I live, it's fairly arid, but humans have changed the environment around here with crops and ag and planting trees and shade and all this kind of stuff. But still, it's pretty arid here. It's considered a high altitude desert. And we do have wolves here, but you're not going to find a majority of the wolves in the desert, right? So I think it was more so because of the environment naturally that
Oh,
was there.
I love it. See, this is why it's always great to nerd out because, again, I mean, I'd like to consider myself intellectual, but for some reason, I didn't even look at that side of it. I just came to the assumption that, yeah, dummy, go ahead and just keep on stepping into the tar. But yeah, I mean, maybe they're, like you said, weren't cave lions or the American lion. There's a difference. People should know the American lion is different than the cave lion. They've been able to distinguish that, but they were prairie dwellers as well, those lions. And same thing with the
Hmm.
canines. So yeah, that would make sense. I mean, if they're not even in that area and the saber-toothed cat and also the dire wolves were in that area, that would 100% make logical sense as to why you're seeing those predators in there. Because I mean, it might not have anything to do with intellect because the gray wolves might have done the same thing. So that's
Right.
very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you look down there at the LA basin, that whole area down there, right, where the La Brea tar pits, it was desert. The water started. They built the aqueduct or whatever you want to call it down from the Sierra Nevadas, right, down to the LA area to bring them water. They had no water, and then they planted orchards, and then it became, yeah. So
Okay. That's great
yeah.
stuff. So before I toss you the mic and let you start blowing some more minds, do you think that I shouldn't even say think. I mean, I guess in logic, I mean, as a species that's been around for a while, they become smarter, but then you already have things like saltwater crocodiles that have a need to increase their intelligence. I mean, they know when you come down to the water and all this stuff. So, I mean, they got their game plan down pretty dang good. So, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, would you think a prehistoric lion or a prehistoric gray wolf would be less intellectual than a modern day one? And if you were to put those modern day predators in that same environment where they could get stuck, do you think they would?
Yeah, I mean, if it's the same, I think modern day predators would be stuck just like prehistoric ones if there's no other source. If the logic for the dinosaurs in Vernal holds that scientists believe there was a dwindling supply of water and they came in and kept getting stuck, what
Hmm.
else are you going to do? They
No,
had to
exactly.
find water.
Ah,
So
okay.
if the environment doesn't change and you put a different species in there, even a modern day species, I think the same thing's going to happen.
No, that would 100% make sense. And I mean, I just value your intellect and you're a scientist. So, I mean, just because I thought that was an interesting aspect of my own brain, I'm just a journalist. So, until I start asking, the scientist about it, it kind of just sits in that file in my brain. So, I love that right there. And I'm going to throw you the mic because you have even more information.
Well, it was. I shared with you a photo, and I'm hoping that you might be able to share this photo with the finished podcast of an animal that was found on a trail in my area. Now, if this animal, it's a decomposing animal, and somebody snapped this photo when they were out on a trail run, put it in a local like trail runners group, and said, "What in the heck is this thing?" Right? They said, is it a coyote? What is this? And so I found this photo really fascinating because of the size of the the um the incisors are so much smaller than like the large canines, and I can't figure out what this thing is. So I showed this photo to four, mm, I think four now, different biologists, two of which I work with, and then one is on our science team, and you know him, and um, I guess it's three biologists, sorry, and nobody can identify this animal. So, and just by chance, somebody in another group online showed the difference between a wolf and a hyena, and it was looking at the mouth, the structure of the teeth and the jaws. And if this photo of this decomposing animal has not been tampered with, like if somebody hasn't planted some false teeth into this thing, or something that looks like teeth, this thing looks more hyena-like than wolf or coyote or anything else. It does look like it has more of a canine face, but it's really hard to say. The body of it does not look canine. The fur does not look canine at all. It looks more cat. So nobody can identify this, and I've talked to the biologists at work, and we've all just kind of like, what do you think? And then we keep coming back in a big circle, and we can't figure out what this is. Now I have to preface this by saying I have not seen this animal in this decomposing animal for myself, and I know Dirty Bird has gone out to try to find it on the trail and has not been able to locate it. And I'm really hoping that we can locate it, but now snow's starting to fly, so I don't know if we'll be able to. But there's some interesting things that go on out there. And this is a trail that's just right out of town. I mean, animals adapt. They're very adaptable. So who knows what this thing is, but it apparently has no fear of town because it was right up against the edge of town. And that's the thing that I'm always curious about with Dogman, is looking at the environment that these animals are sighted in and what the environment is around them, and what they're using for cover, what they're using for food sources. Are they becoming more and more, or I should say, well, I guess more and more habituated to humans? Is that why we're starting to see more and more sightings? Just like a grizzly bear or a black bear, they become more and more habituated, and then they become a problem because now they're coming into somebody's tent and dragging them out. That kind of situation. Are we looking at some of these animals that we've not been able to actually get a specimen of, but we're getting more and more sightings of them? Is that because we're more in their territory or they're more in ours now? There's a gray area there.
Wow, my brain in a good way. This is, again, excellent stuff right here, and all valid questions. I mean, you are the scientist here, my friend, and I wish I had quality answers for you, but I really have no more answers, I guess, than what I presented, meaning just listening, because yes, there is something very interesting about that. But like you said, there could be a couple things going on. It might not have been taken in the actual place it was taken, meaning that could explain why no one else has found it. Or again, I mean, come on, there are so many animals out there that pull away things. I mean, even just to have saw that in the first place is almost a miracle. So that's pretty interesting right there for sure. And yeah, those teeth are strange in the back. And like you said, with the hyena's mouth opening, I'll try to figure that all out. I know the unalived one because it was sent to you, but just with YouTube and how they all roll, I'll talk to our artist Meiku as well, and she should be able to draw up something based off of that where we can definitely show it, which is pretty sweet. And it all boils down to, like we were speaking about before we rolled on here, I mean, again, dire wolves. They're jackals basically, but they don't look like jackals, and they don't really act like jackals. Okay, so same thing with this thing. I mean, it doesn't look like a coyote necessarily, doesn't look like a wolf, doesn't look like a fox necessarily, but throughout history, there are numerous canines, numerous bears, and numerous hyenas that don't look like what they are, or look like they should be that, but they're not. I mean, just when people think of the amphicenoids, the amphicenoidae, the bear dogs and all that, right there, bear dogs. I mean, what were they, a bear or a dog? Neither, and same thing with the hyenas, like I was telling you about, the king of the hyena, the skull crusher. First they were like, yes, this is the king hyena. Then somebody else is like, I don't know, dude, like the teeth just look a little bit different in the jaw. Now we're taking away that crown. Okay, so then it's not a king of the hyena anymore. But then they found a bunch more specimens, and then they're like, yes, this is definitely a hyena. Let's bring that crown back. So boom. But they don't know necessarily if it looked more canine-ish or actually more hyena-ish. And that's something that's really interesting too, like you said, with the sleek fur and stuff though. I mean, if someone saw a hyena, it's got a huge mane, especially some of the more prehistoric ones. It is going to have sleeker fur because no, it's not related to cats or dogs, but more closely to cats than dogs. But they're related to weasels, mongoose, ferrets, and such like that. And they're going to have more sleek fur. So you got the
Mm.
elongated snout, you got the longer front arms, you got the shorter back legs, and oh, geez, I spoke about this the other night. The boda in Ethiopia and also a ton of other African lore. They have two different versions of were hyenas, the hyena beast, like we like to call it, but they have nothing to do with werewolves. It's just hyenas. So one is every other generation, a quality blacksmith family might have an offspring that is susceptible to having this power. And then you must go out and use a special stick and rub it. They don't really tell you what you're rubbing it with. It could be hyena oil. It could be very similar to some of the stuff that you see in the Skinwalker lore. They don't tell you. But then afterwards, you need certain ash as well. So it does sound like some sort of ceremony. But then the
Mhm.
other one is actual hyenas that I think are the cynocephali that legit these people would say would act and pretend to be humans. They would wear cloaks over their head, longer clothing, so you could not tell it was a hyena. They would act like they wanted to trade with you, and then you would approach them. They would snag you and take you away. And they literally fall into the classification of what cynocephalites look like. So again, here it is. We have wolves and hyenas. What the heck is with it in every culture? I mean, don't get me wrong. You have some other cultures, obviously, that have other animals that are spiritual dwelling, but you don't have indigenous cultures here in America speaking about mystical bipedal tigers walking around. But you have every dang culture in the world speaking about either canines or hyena-based bipedal type like creatures. Like, what the heck?
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, now wasn't it Idaho also where they I think the Natural History Museum in Pocatello has a skeleton of a cave hyena that was found in Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so we've been trying to get in there to be able to measure it. I'm still working on it, and or at least get maybe some if they've measured, the structure of this thing. So if that was found here in Idaho, it's not really a stretch that there could be relatives of this thing here.
I don't see
And
why that
this,
would be at all, like you said. And
right?
do you have your computer or your phone in front of you? If you have you ever seen the ring Docus? That legit was unalived in the late 1800s, I believe, near where you are. And sure, even if it was bad taxidermy, man, that doesn't look like any sort of canine or anything, and it yet looks kind of like a dang cave hyena or maybe a dire wolf. And
Oh,
obviously, like a bunch of idiots, instead of getting any sort of DNA first, they just decide to put poisonous chemicals all over it and taxidermy it. So there's no way now to get any sort of DNA value out of this because it's been ruined, but you can see it. And I don't know. I feel like that's pretty hard to prefabricate because it looks and falls into the dang category of the Shakuwaran and the dog taker up in that area of Canada as well. So what the heck?
yeah. Yeah, I it's amazing how many times we believe something is extinct only to a decade or 2 decades later or 60 to 100 years later we find it in a habitat we didn't know it would exist in. So that's the thing about science, and is it's our theories and our they're constantly changing as we get more information. Uh, we don't have all of the answers, and we never will. I mean, it's science, right? We just keep working to try to gather more information and more data and test those hypotheses over and over again. But there's no reason to believe that some of these animals that we believe are extinct are truly extinct, or they haven't, like you said, like the grizzly bear with the DNA, right? That from the other species. There's no reason to believe that these animals did not breed outside of their species um, to perpetuate, just like the polar bear and the grizzly bear, right? to perpetuate. I mean, that's primarily that's what animals do. They're trying to reproduce to keep their species alive somehow. It's just ingrained. That's so
Yeah,
I don't
that's just how
know.
nature rolls, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. It's kind
that
of like
is.
what I was saying about the blueprint. And this ties into Dogman as well because about the evolutionary aspect, meaning things do change, and there really is no reason, for example, to say a hyena couldn't go back to kind of using trees like ferrets and other things do. Their relatives do. I'm not saying this is occurring. I'm just saying evolution occurs in front of us all the time. They have so many cool videos of monkeys and things that don't like the water, that are using spears, chimpanzees that have these weapons,
Hmm.
gorillas stopping their offspring so they can disarm a poacher's trap and all these things. We legit are watching things learn and evolve in front of us. Okay, we changed our diet. Animals changed their diet. I mean, look at orcas right now. They obviously are missing a normal food source to now start just taking livers out of sharks and such. Okay, because again, they needed to change their food source. So we have the Gigantopithecus right here. And the reason I'm saying this as well is yes, this isn't a dogman. This is a primate, okay? But what I'm trying to say is it's changed its diet. And throughout history, there are canines that changed their diet too, like gray wolves, for example, when we were talking about it. The dire wolves were believed to just be straight up meat, 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 while the gray wolves were eating other things, which they also think is another reason why gray wolves ended up being more successful in the end, kind of like potentially with a great white shark and the megalodon, etc. Picture the Gigantopithecus now. At first, they only had a few pieces of the teeth and jaw. Well, they found some more now, and they've also found a piece of the bottom of the skull that would connect to the spine. And these scientists believe this thing was bipedal by the way the jaw would have sat, because when they look at other things that are bipedal, same thing with the jaw sitting down. And they also believe this thing was anywhere from 10, 12 to 14 feet tall. And there is historical aspects of some sort of clashing between modern day humans, obviously this is what we do with everything, and Gigantopithecus. There's also evidence supporting that they were still kicking around 9,000, 10,000, 11,000. Some people even saying like 1,000 years ago. Okay, that's really not that far away. And what they think happened with them as well, just like us. Well, how did modern day Homo erectus? They were encroached by other hominoids based like them that then forced them to have to move around more and consume not just harvesting berries and such. And they started becoming hunter gatherers. And then if you look, well, their brain, exploded because they had more nutrients, they had fire and such, all these things. Okay, it happens. So there are teeth. If you look at your teeth in the mirror, we're not really meant for just ripping things apart and going, "Nyah, nyah, nyah." Our teeth doesn't look like a canine's or a
Hmm.
cat, etc. But we did it. So Gigantopithecus, same thing. Their teeth would have been designed more to be eating grains and such. But like you said with the Dinopithecus, the giant baboon, anyone would have to be out of their mind to think that that thing's not going to rip and eat some sort of meat too. Okay, I mean, just because why did they have these huge werewolf-looking teeth if they were just eating grass? Doesn't make sense. Now you have this Gigantopithecus that's been pushed out of its normal environment and has one of two things: go extinct or adapt now where it needs to
Hmm.
eat meat and such too. And it's not that far fetched. I mean, deer and things are herbivores. Yeah, somebody showed me a video. I don't know if this deer had some sort of head injury or something, but it was eating a baby rabbit. People told me it was
Wow.
because it needed more calcium or it was missing some sort of nutrient in its body at that point in time. So, I mean, sure, same thing. Squirrels, right, are considered to be, for the most part, nuts and stuff. Well, I learned a very disturbing fact. Unfortunately, there's a mouse we had to catch, and yes, mouse traps, I hate it, but we can't have those things running around. Either way, threw the mouse outside, and one of the neighborhood squirrels picked it up and was yum, yum, yum. And I mean, they eat eggshells and such. So again,
Yeah.
it's something that's based to just usually eat nuts and things, but they also eat the marrow out of bones. So it's not that
Hmm.
far fetched to think that these Gigantopithecus would have changed their habit and diet as well. And that could really fall into the same thing with the Dogman thing, where you have different behaviors, okay? But it's all listed as one, whether it's hyena, bear man, etc. Well, same thing with Sasquatch. You have Neanderthal men and women, most likely, that in very small areas are still dwelling probably in caves and such. And if you saw a
Right.
Neanderthal with fur and stuff all on it from a distance, yeah, that would look like a crazy hairy forest person. But then you have other behaviors with the wood knocking and the bending of trees, which sure, that could be done by primitive humans, but that's also ape behavior. So it's just really
Mhm.
interesting to see the difference in the behaviors, but it's still listed as Sasquatch, the Grassman, and such. And I just thought you might find that interesting too.
Yeah, and behavior is largely, I think, environmentally influenced. Look at deer and how deer live in the forest, right? If you have a lot of cover, you'll find deer hanging out in groups of like 4 to 8. There's a lot of cover in there, and they're able to hide well. But then you take deer out on a prairie, and you will find them in large numbers, like elk or um, antelope. They get in large numbers because it's less. The chances of survival are greater. Look at zebras, right? And how they herd up in these really large herds, because if there's a lion pride hunting them, chances are greater. You have greater chances of survival if you're among 1,000 versus 8. So I think the environment. So it's kind of I guess, a chicken and eggs scenario, right? Does your animal behavior, is your environment influencing the behavior, or does the behavior of the animal, do they look for a particular habitat? I don't know. I think it's more environment influences behavior, and I think, like you
Yes.
said, yeah. So I think that the food sources, even though an animal is supposed to be an herbivore, it doesn't mean. I had a horse that would love tuna fish. So come
Yes.
on. It just, who knows? Who knows? I have chickens will take out a mouse and a bird like you would not. I mean, fast. I've watched my
Hmm.
chickens descend upon a mouse, and it's not pretty. So,
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying. Exactly.
right.
And I learned a really super interesting fact about the avocados and such. The only reason avocados are still kicking around is because, luckily, one of the good things humans have actually done is, well, we kept them around. But those are designed for large herbivores to pass through their digestive system, and no known herbivore can poop that out, really. I mean, there might be a couple, but earlier I was eating some avocados. Some of the neighborhood squirrels were outside chilling, so I threw it out there. Oh, one of them loved that little avocado. Well, it's a huge avocado seed, but they were going ham on it. And like you said, again, that just right there even shows you evolution, because that's not something that was be around here. No squirrel around here or chipmunk or crow or anything
Mhm.
is going to get his hands on an avocado seed, but it was presented to it, and of course it's going to eat it. I mean, winter's coming up and stuff, so yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Animals are really opportunistic, and I think we sometimes put them in a box, and I think we forget that a lot of animals, even herbivores, I've seen some weird things, and they'll take what they need to survive. I mean, yeah. So.
You know what's so awesome too is I already love you and think you're awesome as well. But what you just touched base on, I had already spoken about this, but I might as well just add a little bit of spice before we let you get back to what you're doing. Is that's what they think. Same thing with families, and like you said, with herds. So yes, we enjoyed our families and people around us in prehistoric times, but that's also why, survival of the fittest. We were able to survive because we would be in groups like that, and well, people can use their imagination. The slower
Mhm.
ones would be consumed by the giant sloth coming into your camp. Well, the rest would run off. Okay. And same thing with, like you said, with zebras and everything else like that. It's a way of survival. I mean, you have a much better chance, whether you're a predator or herbivore, to be able to survive in groups. I mean, if you're a solo predator, like for example, I learned an awesome thing about Allosaurus, and wow, so creative here. Big Al 1 and Big Al 2. What the heck? Big Al 1 is the one I'm going to refer to here. They don't know if it was female or male, so oh geez, great job, guys. But like it did have have some sort of break in its foot where they're able to see that there was some sort of nasty bone bacteria that had grown in there, and its bone was growing over top of it again, new fresh bone. So they said it would have been so painful that the way it was walking would have then put its other leg into a very dire situation of being injured. And that's what I mean about being solo. That thing was screwed. As far as they know, it just pretty much most likely collapsed where they found it. It was just toast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, unfortunately, I just had the same thing with I had a very large draft horse, and he had developed an abscess in a hoof, and he was older, and I was kept watching the other front leg because now he's having to balance 2,500 pounds on three legs. And it finally got to the point where I finally had to euthanize him, unfortunately. But it was the more humane thing to do for him because he was suffering so much, because the other leg started breaking down.
Yes.
And so an animal's designed for four legs, they can't take the weight, that weight distribution. Something like a dog can. They're not that heavy. But
yes, that's a big difference, you said.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You
Or
get up
cat or
into
something. Yes.
Yeah, a cat or a dog, something smaller, a goat. I had a goat named Tripod. I mean, he was fine. So, but you get into 500 pounds and then up. There's not much that our limbs can take.
Even a grizzly, I think, would be all right. Very true.
Yeah, it would be hard. So, yeah, animals they're amazingly adaptive, and they're unbelievably fragile.
I know, isn't that so crazy? Like, same thing with us. I mean, it's just bizarre, but well, you are such a busy person, so I do probably need to let you get back to what you're doing. But before we close the Midnight Society book tonight, do you have anything else you would like to touch base on?
No, I think we covered it for this time. I've got some stuff teed up for the next time we get together.
Yes, this is great. I love hearing that. And yes, please come on more. I know you are super busy, but I think it will be super beneficial for all of us to just keep on working together. And I think it will be a very good way to get us all to our end game and where we want to be. And I mean, I got a lot of good stuff coming up where I'm going to be doing a bi-weekly show with the legendary Steve Stockton from Missing Persons Mysteries and stuff like that. So I'd like to just get all my hosts and everybody else, involved in all that stuff. So yes, please do keep in touch, and you always have great information. So I look forward to hearing from you soon. And I do need to, once I get this paperwork, get you in contact with the new biologist as well that would like to jump on board. So it's great stuff.
That's great. I think it would be fun to get the science team together on your show all at once. That'd be fun.
Absolutely epic. If you did make it this far in the episode, you truly are a legend, and I do adore you. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share the truth. Feed the algorithm, and I will see you very soon.